Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at a 2008 novel called The Museum of Innocence.
Ah, yes, by Orhan Pamuk.
Exactly, by Turkish author Orhan Pamuk. And it's this really fascinating kind of love story,
It is, yeah.
but also
The
it's
museum.
a museum built around that love story. So
Yeah, he actually built a real museum in Istanbul.
yeah, this is what's so wild about this is that it's a novel.
Right.
And it's also a real place that you can go and see and touch the objects that the character's collecting.
It blurs the line between fiction and reality.
Absolutely. So to kind of set the scene for people, this story takes place in 1970s Istanbul.
It's such a fascinating backdrop for this kind of story.
So tell me, what is it about Istanbul in the 70s that makes it such a great setting?
We have this clash between East and West, tradition and modernity, and it's all happening.
Kind of a cultural
It's a-
melting pot in
Yeah.
a way.
Uh-huh.
So tell me about the main character, Kamal.
Kemal, well, he's a wealthy businessman. He's from a well-respected family, and he's engaged to a woman from his own social circle.
Okay, so already we have this
Right.
pressure of societal expectation.
No, he's supposed to marry this woman, and then he meets Fusun,
Okay.
and she's a distant relative.
So already forbidden.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
It's a transgression of societal norms.
This sounds juicy already, so.
Oh, it is.
I'm already feeling the intensity of this
Oh, yeah.
forbidden romance. So how does this relationship kind of unfold?
Well, he falls head over heels for her,
Okay.
like completely obsessed.
In what way though?
He sacrifices everything for her.
Yeah.
His family, his status, even his own happiness in pursuit of this love he can't fully have.
So he's almost trying to capture something that is unattainable.
Exactly. He's obsessed with not just Fusun herself, but the idea of her,
Dame.
the memory, yeah.
Okay.
And that's where this idea of the museum comes into play.
Okay, so let's talk about the collection itself, because I think that's really the heart of this story.
Absolutely.
It's not like he's collecting, famous paintings or, priceless artifacts.
Yeah.
What is he collecting?
Everyday objects, anything that reminds him of her, cigarette butts,
Okay.
hairpins, a salt shaker from a meal they shared together,
So these mundane objects that most people would just discard,
Right.
he's holding on to them, imbuing them with this.
Exactly. He sees them as tangible links to specific memories, a way to freeze time and hold on to the past.
I mean, I think we can all relate to that on some level. We all have those objects
You.
that, might seem insignificant to someone else, but to us, they hold so much meaning.
Yeah, a ticket stub from a concert or a photograph.
Yeah.
These things become imbued with a certain power.
But Kamal's taking it to a whole other level, right?
Absolutely. It's an obsession.
So this is where the story takes that incredible turn where the collection becomes the museum.
Right. This fictional museum of the novel becomes a real place.
Yeah.
He builds it in Istanbul, and it houses all these objects that we're talking about.
So you can literally walk through the rooms
You can.
and see the cigarette butts and
See the cigarette butts, the hairpins, the salt shaker. It's incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So how does Pamuk kind of connect the book
Well,
to the museum?
he includes a ticket in the back of the novel.
Yeah.
So if you buy the book, you can literally cut out the ticket and use it to get into the museum.
Wait, so I can actually go to this museum and
Sure.
see all these objects that I'm reading about in the book.
It's amazing.
So what is it like to actually be in that space? What kind of experience did he create?
It's very intimate, very personal.
Okay.
It's not a sterile museum environment. It feels like you're stepping into Kemal's world,
Yeah.
his memories.
So it's very immersive.
Very immersive.
I mean, we've talked about the setting the characters is an amazing concept of the museum, but what are some of the deeper themes that Pamuk is exploring through this story?
Well, on the surface, it's a love story, but it's so much more than that.
Okay.
It's about memory. It's about obsession. It's about societal change and the clash between tradition and modernity.
Right, because we're in Istanbul in
Yeah.
the 70s.
A city that's undergoing a massive transformation.
So how do these cultural tensions kind of play out in the story?
Well, Kemal is torn between his love for Fusun and his societal obligations. He's expected to marry a woman from his own social circle.
So there's this constant pull
Yes,
between these two worlds.
exactly. And it's a struggle that I think a lot of people can relate to even today.
Absolutely. So it's not just a story about a man and a woman, it's about a society
Exactly.
grappling with change and how individuals navigate those changes.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so relevant even today.
Mm.
We're all constantly negotiating these tensions between tradition and modernity, personal desires, and societal expectations.
So it's a timeless story in a way,
Absolutely.
even though it's set in a very specific time and place. I think to really understand the depth of Kemal's obsession and the significance of this collection, we need to look closer at the individual objects that make up this museum.
Definitely, each object tells a story, a fragment of this larger narrative about love loss and the power of memory.
So in the next part of our deep dive, we'll take a closer look at some of these objects
We'll delve into the detail
and see what they reveal about Kemal's journey.
and about Pamuk's brilliance.
Well, absolutely.
All right, so let's dive into some of these objects and try to understand what they mean.
Yeah, I'm really curious about those 4,213 cigarette butts.
Oh, yeah, those are striking, aren't they?
I mean, can you even imagine, like,
It's
collecting
mind-blowing.
every cigarette butt that someone smoked?
It speaks to his obsession, right?
Yeah.
Each one represents a moment in her presence, a tangible trace that he clung to.
And it's almost unsettling in a way, isn't it?
It is. It's a bit creepy.
It's like to want to possess even those tiny remnants of someone.
It blurs the lines between devotion and
Obsession.
obsession.
But, maybe there's also a vulnerability there too, right?
Oh, definitely. There's this deep longing for connection.
And what about that salt shaker you mentioned?
The salt shaker. Oh, yeah, that's from a specific night when they dined at her family's home.
Okay.
And later he steals it, as a memento of their shared meal.
So it's like a symbol of,
It represents a life he longed for but could never have.
yeah, domesticity that wasn't meant to be.
Exactly.
It's funny how these ordinary objects can take on such significance, right?
Well, it's incredible, isn't it?
I mean, I think we all have objects that hold special meaning for us.
Oh, yeah.
But for Kamal, it's like he's creating this whole universe out of these objects.
He's building a world, a museum,
Yeah.
where those memories can be shared, explored, even understood by others.
So he's externalizing his internal world in a way.
Exactly. He's giving tangible form to his intangible feelings.
You mentioned that these objects are displayed in vignettes.
Yes.
Can you give me an example of what that might look like?
Okay, so picture this. A dimly lit room with maybe a deep blue wall, and on a small table, you see a collection of Fusen's earrings alongside a handwritten love letter from Kamal.
So it's like a frozen moment in time.
Exactly. And each vignette tells a little piece of their story.
So is the museum meant to be a celebration of his love, or is there a darker side to it?
I think it's both. There's the beauty of his devotion, but also the unsettling nature of his possessiveness.
Like he's objectifying her in a way through these objects.
Yeah, there's that element too, and I think Pamuk leaves that ambiguity intentionally.
So it's up to the visitor to kind of
To grapple with those complexities.
draw their own conclusions.
Exactly.
It makes me think about our own relationship with objects and memories. Like, when does that attachment become unhealthy?
Well, that's a good question.
When does the desire to preserve the past prevent us from living in the present?
Well, I think that's one of the questions that Pamuk is exploring in this novel and the museum.
Yeah, and you mentioned a dog-shaped earring. I'm curious about that one.
Oh, yes, the dog-shaped earring.
Oh.
Well, Kamal finds it in Fusen's room,
Okay.
and it becomes this symbol of her youthful spirit, her playfulness.
Something that he wants to hold on to
Desperate.
as their relationship falls apart.
Right.
It's interesting how none of these objects are, particularly valuable in a material sense,
True.
but they hold so much emotional weight.
It's a reminder that value is subjective.
Yeah.
It's personal and connected to our own experiences.
We've talked a lot about Kamal, but I'm wondering about Fisen's perspective.
That's a good point.
How does she feel about all of this?
Well, we mostly see her through Kamal's eyes,
Yeah.
which are obviously biased.
Yeah.
But we know that she enjoys his attention, the gifts he gives her.
So we don't know her true feelings,
It's left open to interpretation.
which is interesting because it makes us question the power dynamics in their relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is all happening against the backdrop of a changing Turkey.
Right. A country caught between tradition and modernity.
And their love story becomes a kind of microcosm of that larger societal struggle.
So it's not just a personal drama. It's also a commentary on Turkish society at the time.
Precisely. And I think that's part of what makes Pamuk's work so fascinating.
He weaves together those personal and political threads so seamlessly.
He does.
You mentioned earlier that the museum evokes a range of emotions.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, some people find it deeply moving.
Okay.
They connect with Kemal's longing for Fusen. They see the beauty in his devotion.
Others.
Others are more disturbed by his possessiveness, the way he objectifies her.
Right, so there's no one right way to feel about it.
Exactly. It's a mirror reflecting our own values and beliefs.
I'm really curious to hear more about the design of the museum itself.
Oh, yeah.
How did Pamuk create this immersive experience?
Well, in the final part of our deep dive, we'll actually step inside the museum.
Okay.
We'll explore its architecture, the atmosphere, and how it all comes together to create this unforgettable experience.
All right, let's step inside this museum then. What's it like inside?
Well, it's not your typical museum. It's housed in an old 19th century house in Biolu.
Okay, so not like a sterile white cube.
No, no, not at all. It's a bit run down, actually, faded grandeur kind of feeling.
So the building itself has a story.
Exactly. It adds to the atmosphere, even the weight of the past.
So stepping inside, you're already kind of transported back in time.
Exactly. You're in Kemal's world.
And the objects themselves, how are they displayed?
In these really interesting vignettes.
Vignettes, okay.
Yeah, so each one represents a scene or a moment from the novel.
With little snapshots.
Exactly, frozen moments in time.
Can you give me an example?
Okay, so imagine like a dimly lit room, walls painted a deep blue, and on a table you see a silver cigarette case next to it, a half-empty bottle of perfume and a lace handkerchief, and above it all, a framed photo of Fusoon.
Wow, it's like a still life.
Yes, very much so.
And each one of these vignettes is like a window into Kemal's mind.
Exactly, you're seeing the world through his eyes.
What, are there any explanations or labels?
There are, but they're not typical museum labels.
Oh.
Pamuk actually wrote these little snippets of text that go with each vignette.
So it's more like Kemal is narrating his own story.
Exactly. It's like he's whispering his secrets to you as you walk through the museum.
Wow. And you mentioned earlier that it's a multi-sensory experience.
Oh, yeah. It's not just about what you see. There are soundscapes playing throughout the museum.
Like what?
The sounds of Istanbul in the 70s, the chatter in a cafe, traditional music, the call to prayer.
So you're really enveloped in the atmosphere.
And there are even smells,
Mm.
like strong Turkish coffee spices, the faint scented tobacco.
So he's really trying to transport you back to that time.
Completely. It's a full body experience.
It's almost like a performance or even like a therapy session,
So interesting.
where you're confronting your own memories and emotions.
It's definitely an experience that stays with you.
So what kind of reactions do people have to the museum?
It varies. Some people are just blown away by it.
Yeah.
They're touched by Kemal's love for Fusun. They see the beauty in his devotion.
Okay.
Others are more creeped out by it.
Yeah.
They see the possessiveness, the objectification of Fusun.
It sounds like a Rorschach test in a way.
It is. It reveals as much about the viewer as it does about Kemal.
So what do you think Pamuk was trying to do with this museum? What was his intention?
Well, I think he wanted to challenge us.
To challenge us.
To think about memory, about how we attach meaning to objects, and how we construct our own narratives about the past.
It's like the past isn't really gone.
It's still there haunting us in a way.
Living on in these objects and these stories.
Exactly. And maybe in the end, the Museum of Innocence is really about all of us.
About all of us.
It's about our own struggles with
Yeah.
love and loss and our attempts to make sense of our lives.
I think that's a great place to leave it. It's been such a fascinating conversation.
It really has.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights on this really unique novel and museum.
My pleasure.
And for everyone listening, if you're interested in learning more, definitely check out the book. And if you ever find yourself in Istanbul, make sure to visit the museum.
It's worth the trip.
It sounds like it. And if you could create your own museum of memories, what would you include? What stories would your objects tell? Let us know in the comments. And until next time, happy diving.